Lena Carter's hands trembled as the card reader beeped, declined. Again. Behind her, a familiar laugh cut through the fluorescent-lit grocery store like a blade. She turned, and her stomach dropped. Evan Cole, her ex-boyfriend, the man who'd promised her forever, then vanished when her mother got sick and the medical bills started piling up. Now he stood 10 feet away in a designer suit, his arm wrapped around a woman dripping in diamonds, and his eyes locked on Lena's empty basket with cruel amusement. This wasn't a chance encounter. This was a public execution, and Lena had nowhere to run. Before we begin this story of revenge, redemption, and the dangerous man who changed everything, please hit that like button and comment below with your city so I can see how far Lena's journey reaches. Now, let's dive in. Bad. The discount grocery store on 5th Street smelled like industrial cleaner and desperation. Lena had been coming here for 6 months, ever since her mother's funeral, since the hospital bills had consumed every cent of her savings, since she'd learned that 26 years old meant nothing when you were starting from zero with debt wrapped around your neck like a noose. She stood at register 3, staring at the card reader like it might suddenly develop mercy. The cashier, a middle-aged woman named Donna who'd checked her out dozens of times, wouldn't meet her eyes. The line behind Lena had grown to 5 people, and she could feel their impatience radiating like heat. "Do you have another card?" Donna asked quietly, professionally, but Lena heard the pity underneath. Lena's throat closed. She had $37 in her checking account. She'd calculated everything down to the penny. A loaf of bread, peanut butter, generic pasta, sauce. $14.63, well below her limit, but the card reader disagreed. She tried again. Declined. "Maybe there's a hold on your account," Donna suggested, still not looking at her. "Sometimes banks, or maybe she's just broke." The voice came from behind her, smooth and familiar and designed to cut. Lena's entire body went cold. She didn't want to turn around. If she didn't turn around, maybe this wouldn't be real. Maybe she could pretend she hadn't heard, grab her items, leave with the last shreds of her dignity intact. But she turned anyway. Because some part of her, the part that still remembered what it felt like to be loved, to matter, to be seen as something other than a burden, needed to confirm that yes, the universe really did hate her this much. Evan Cole stood 3 people back in line, and he'd changed. The Evan she'd dated 2 years ago had been ambitious, charming, always talking about his startup, his investments, his plans. That Evan had worn khakis and button-downs from outlet stores. This Evan wore a suit that probably cost more than Lena's monthly rent. His dark hair was perfectly styled. His watch caught the fluorescent light and threw it back like a challenge. And on his arm, like an accessory he'd purchased to match the suit, stood a woman who belonged in magazines Lena couldn't afford. Blonde, sculpted, wearing a dress that moved like liquid and probably had a designer name Lena wouldn't recognize. She looked at Lena with the kind of detached curiosity people reserved for zoo animals. "Evan," Lena said, and her voice came out smaller than she wanted. "Lena Carter." He said her full name like he was identifying a specimen. "Wow, I almost didn't recognize you." The woman on his arm tilted her head. "This is her? The one you told me about?" "The very one." Evan's smile was sharp enough to draw blood. "Lena, this is Victoria, my fiancée." Victoria extended her hand, not to shake, but to display. The diamond on her finger could have paid Lena's mother's medical bills 3 times over. It caught the light the same way Evan's watch did, throwing brilliance into all the dark corners where Lena's failures lived. "Charmed," Victoria said, though her expression suggested otherwise. Lena's hand hung empty at her side. She'd removed her own ring, the cheap promise ring Evan had given her before everything fell apart, months ago. Sold it, actually, for $43 that went straight to the electric company. "Ma'am?" Donna's voice pulled Lena back to the register. "Do you want to try another payment method?" "She doesn't have another payment method," Evan said, loud enough that the whispers started. "Lena's always been terrible with money. Remember, babe? I told you how she maxed out her credit cards on her mom's medical bills instead of, being practical about it." Victoria made a sympathetic noise that contained no actual sympathy. "That's so sad. But you can't save everyone, I suppose." Lena's hands curled into fists. "My mother had cancer." And throwing money at it didn't fix it, did it? Evan stepped out of line, closing the distance between them. Victoria followed because apparently this was entertainment worth abandoning groceries for. I tried to tell you, Lena. I tried to explain that you were making emotional decisions instead of logical ones, but you never listened. You left, Lena said, and she hated how her voice shook. You left 2 weeks after her diagnosis. I gave you an out. Evan's voice dropped, intimate and cruel. I said we could make it work if you were smart about it. Hospice care, government assistance. But you insisted on those private facilities, those experimental treatments. You chose her over our future. The fluorescent lights hummed. Someone's phone chimed. Lena felt like she was underwater, drowning in front of an audience too polite to intervene and too entertained to leave. She was my mother. And now she's gone, and you're here, can't even afford bread. Evan gestured at her basket. Was it worth it? Victoria touched his arm gently. Darling, don't be cruel. She clearly did her best. She looked at Lena with something that might have been kindness in another context. Evan told me you were working as a barista? That's honest work. Nothing to be ashamed of. 3 part-time jobs, actually, Lena said, because some stupid part of her needed them to know she was trying. Barista in the morning, data entry in the afternoon, night shifts at a call center on weekends. 3 jobs and still can't afford groceries? Evan laughed, not meanly, which somehow made it worse. It was the laugh of someone genuinely amazed by another person's failure. Jesus, Lena, what are you even doing with your life? Surviving, she whispered. Barely. He pulled out his wallet, leather, thick with cards and cash, and extracted a $20 bill. He held it out to her, and the gesture contained more humiliation than any words could. Here, for old time's sake. Buy yourself dinner. Lena stared at the money. Every instinct screamed at her to take it, because $20 meant she could eat something other than peanut butter for the next 3 days. But another part of her, the part that still remembered having pride, having worth, recoiled. I don't want your money. No, you want my pity. Evan tucked the 20 into her jacket pocket before she could stop him, and the casual violation of her space made her flinch. There. Now you can eat tonight and hate me tomorrow. Win-win. Victoria checked her phone, bored now. Babe, we're going to be late for the tasting. Right. Evan stepped back, adjusting his cufflinks. We're finalizing our wedding menu, 17 courses, 300 guests. It's going to be incredible. He looked at Lena like he was seeing her for the first time in years, really seeing her. You know what? You should come. Seriously. I'll send you an invitation. It'll be at the Grandview Estate next month, black tie. Why would you do that? Lena's voice barely worked. Because I want you to see it. His smile was gentle now, which was infinitely worse than cruelty. I want you to see what life looks like when you make smart choices. When you don't throw everything away for lost causes. Maybe it'll inspire you to get your shit together. He said it like he was offering her a gift, like public humiliation at his wedding was an act of charity. Evan, Victoria said, tugging his arm. Come on. They left, just like that. Evan paid for his groceries, organic produce, expensive wine, artisanal cheese, with a black credit card that didn't even require a PIN. Victoria laughed at something he whispered, her hand on his chest, her diamond catching the light one more time like a middle finger aimed directly at Lena's heart. The store was silent, except for the hum of refrigerators and the quiet judgments of strangers. Donna cleared her throat. Ma'am, about your groceries, I don't want them. Lena stepped away from the register, leaving her basket behind. The bread, the peanut butter, the hope that she could make it through one more week without collapsing, all abandoned. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. She walked out before anyone could see her cry. The automatic doors opened with a cheerful chime, releasing her into the parking lot where her car, a 2004 Honda with a dented bumper and an exhaust system held together by prayers, waited in the far corner under a broken streetlight. The November air bit through her thin jacket. Lena fumbled for her keys, hands shaking so badly she dropped them twice. When she finally got the door open, she collapsed into the driver's seat and let the tears come. They burned. God, they burned. Because Evan was right about all of it. Her mother was gone. The medical bills remained. The 3 jobs barely covered rent and utilities. She hadn't bought new clothes in 8 months. She cut her own hair in the bathroom mirror. She ate peanut butter sandwiches for dinner and told herself it was fine. She was fine. Everything was fine. But it wasn't fine. It had never been fine. And now Evan and his perfect fiancée and his black card and his 17-course wedding menu existed as proof that Lena had chosen wrong. That love was a luxury she couldn't afford. That sacrificing everything for her mother's last 6 months of life had been beautiful and noble and completely, utterly stupid. She cried until her throat hurt, until her eyes swelled, until the tears ran out and left her hollow. Then she sat in the silence of her broken car and tried to remember why she was still fighting. No answer came. She reached for the ignition. The key turned. The engine coughed, sputtered, and died. Lena tried again. Nothing. Again. The engine made a grinding noise that sounded like laughter. "No," she whispered. "No, no, no, please." She tried 5 more times. The car was dead. Completely, absolutely dead. Lena dropped her forehead against the steering wheel and laughed, the kind of laugh that lived right next to screaming. Of course this was happening, because the universe wasn't satisfied with humiliating her in public. It needed to trap her here, in this parking lot, in the cold, with no money for a tow truck and no one to call for help. She pulled out her phone. 3% battery, no missed calls, no messages. Her contact list was pathetically short, a few coworkers she barely knew. Her landlord, her boss at the coffee shop who'd already told her she couldn't pick up extra shifts. The phone died in her hand. Perfect. Lena sat in the dark, in the cold, in the silence, and waited for whatever came next. Because at this point, what else could go wrong? The knock on her window came 30 seconds later. She jerked upright, heart hammering. A man stood outside her car, tall, broad-shouldered, wearing a dark coat that looked expensive even in the broken streetlight. She couldn't see his face clearly, just the outline of him, and every self-preservation instinct she had left screamed at her to lock the doors. But the doors were already locked, and he wasn't trying to open them. He just stood there, waiting, like he had all the time in the world. Lena cracked the window half an inch. "Can I help you?" "Your car's not starting." His voice was low, calm, the kind of voice that didn't need to rise to command attention. "Do you need assistance?" "I'm fine." The lie came automatically, reflexively, even though she was absolutely not fine and they both knew it. "You're sitting alone in a dead car in an empty parking lot." He tilted his head slightly. "That's not fine, that's dangerous. I'll call someone." "Your phone's dead." It wasn't a question, somehow he knew. "And you're not fine. You're crying." Lena's hand went to her face, found the tears she'd thought she'd finished. "I'm handling it." "I'm sure you are." He stepped back slightly, giving her space. "But you don't have to handle it alone." Something in his tone made her look at him, really look. The broken streetlight flickered, and in that brief illumination, she saw his face. Strong jaw, dark eyes that held something between concern and calculation. The kind of face that belonged to men who made decisions and expected the world to rearrange itself accordingly. "Who are you?" she asked. "Someone who'd like to help." He glanced back toward the street where a black car idled with its headlights off. Not a car, a vehicle. Something sleek and powerful and completely out of place in this discount grocery store parking lot. "My driver can take you wherever you need to go. Or we can call you a tow truck. Your choice." "I don't know you." "No," he agreed. "But I know what it looks like when someone's having the worst day of their life. And I know that sitting in this parking lot isn't going to make it better." Lena should have said no, should have told him to leave, that she'd figure it out, that accepting help from strange men in parking lots was how people ended up on true crime podcasts. But she was so tired, so completely bone-deep exhausted from fighting and failing and pretending she wasn't drowning. "Why do you care?" she asked. The question seemed to surprise him. He considered it for a long moment, his dark eyes never leaving hers. "Because someone should." It was the answer that broke her. Not pity, not charity. Just simple recognition that she existed, that her pain mattered, that maybe she deserved more than this parking lot and this broken car and this empty, desperate life. She unlocked the door. He opened it carefully, offering his hand. She took it, and his grip was warm, steady, the kind of solid presence she hadn't felt in 2 years. He helped her out of the car, and she realized how tall he was, at least 6'2", broad through the shoulders, carrying himself with the kind of quiet authority that made people step aside without being asked. "What's your name?" he asked. "Lena. Lena Carter." "Lena." He said it like he was committing it to memory. "I'm Adrian." No last name, just Adrian. Like that was all she needed to know. He guided her toward the black car, and as they got closer, she realized 2 things. First, it wasn't just a car. It was an SUV with tinted windows and the kind of silent engine that cost more than she'd earn in 5 years. Second, they weren't alone. 2 men stood near the vehicle, both in dark suits, both watching the parking lot with the systematic attention of people trained to spot threats. "It's all right," Adrian said, feeling her hesitation. "They work for me." "What do you do?" The question came out before she could stop it. Adrian smiled, small, private, like she'd asked something amusing. "I solve problems." One of the men opened the rear door. The interior was leather and warmth and the faint scent of expensive cologne. Lena hesitated at the threshold between her life and whatever this was. "Where do you live?" Adrian asked. She told him. A studio apartment in a neighborhood that made people lock their car doors. He didn't react, didn't judge, just nodded and gave the driver an address. Lena slid into the back seat. Adrian settled beside her, maintaining a respectful distance. The door closed with a sound that suggested engineering far beyond her understanding. They drove in silence for 3 blocks. Lena stared out the window at the city she'd lived in her entire life, the streets she knew by heart, wondering how everything could look the same when she felt like a completely different person than the one who'd walked into that grocery store an hour ago. "The man in the store," Adrian said quietly. "The one who gave you money. Who was he?" Lena's hands twisted in her lap. "My ex-boyfriend." "He hurt you." It wasn't a question, but she answered anyway. "He left when things got hard. When my mom got sick. When I needed him most." She took a breath. "And now he's getting married to someone perfect, and he wanted to make sure I knew it. By humiliating you in public. By showing me what I could have had if I'd made different choices." The words tasted bitter. "If I'd been smarter, more practical, less human?" Adrian turned to look at her, and his dark eyes held something dangerous. Less compassionate? Less willing to sacrifice everything for the people you love? Lena's throat tightened. "He said I made emotional decisions instead of logical ones. And he made logical decisions instead of honorable ones." Adrian's voice was soft, but underneath it ran something cold and absolute. "Which one of you can sleep at night?" She couldn't answer that. She couldn't sleep most nights, actually, but not because of guilt, because of fear that she'd made the wrong choice, that her mother's last months of comfort had cost Lena her entire future. "What's his name?" Adrian asked. "Why?" "Because I'd like to know who I'm dealing with." "You're not dealing with anyone. This isn't—" Lena shook her head. "Thank you for the ride, really, but I don't need you to fix this. It's my life, my mess." "And if I wanted to help anyway?" "Why would you?" She turned to face him fully. "You don't know me. I'm nobody. I'm the girl who can't afford groceries, who works 3 jobs and still can't make ends meet, who made every wrong choice and ended up with nothing. Why would you possibly care?" Adrian was quiet for a long moment. The SUV glided through the streets, smooth as water. Outside, the city lights painted shadows across his face. "You're not nobody," he finally said. "You're someone who loved her mother enough to bankrupt herself trying to save her. You're someone who works 3 jobs instead of giving up. You're someone who said no to money from a man who hurt you, even though you needed it." He met her eyes. "You're someone worth caring about, Lena Carter, even if you don't believe it yet." The words hit her like physical things. She felt them in her chest, in her throat, in all the hollow places where Evan's cruelty had carved out her sense of worth. "I don't understand you," she whispered. "You will." Adrian pulled a card from his pocket. black matte, with a phone number embossed in silver. Nothing else. No name, no title, no explanation. Keep this. If you need anything, and I mean anything, call that number. I can't. You can. He pressed the card into her hand. And you will, eventually. Because life is about to get very interesting for your ex-boyfriend, and you're going to want to see it happen. The SUV pulled up in front of her building. The driver got out, opened her door. Adrian remained in the back seat, watching her with those dark, calculating eyes. "What are you going to do?" Lena asked. Adrian smiled, and for the first time she saw something predatory in it, something that suggested he was exactly the kind of man mothers warned their daughters about. "I'm going to give you a gift," he said. "Justice. And then, Lena Carter, I'm going to give you a choice." Before she could ask what that meant, he nodded to the driver. The door closed. The SUV pulled away, leaving her standing on the sidewalk with a business card and more questions than answers. Lena climbed the 3 flights to her apartment, unlocked the door, and stepped into the small space that held everything she owned. The card felt heavy in her pocket. Dangerous. Like a grenade with the pin half pulled. She set it on the counter and stared at it for a long time. Then she went to bed and dreamed of dark eyes and quiet voices, and the dangerous promise that maybe, just maybe, she was worth saving after all. The card sat on Lena's counter for 3 days like a loaded gun she was afraid to touch. She went to work. All 3 jobs, the endless rotation of coffee-stained aprons and computer screens and headset calls from angry customers. She came home to her studio apartment with its flickering radiator and thin walls that transmitted every argument from the couple next door. She ate peanut butter sandwiches and tried not to think about Evan's face in that grocery store, his casual cruelty, the weight of that $20 bill he'd shoved into her pocket like she was a charity case. The money still sat in her jacket. She hadn't spent it, couldn't bring herself to, even when her stomach cramped with hunger. Using it felt like admitting he was right about her. On the 4th day, her landlord knocked on her door at 7 in the morning. Lena answered in the same clothes she'd slept in, her hair unwashed, her eyes red from another sleepless night. "Mr." Petrov looked uncomfortable, which was never a good sign. He was a hard man who'd survived worse things than uncomfortable conversations. "Lena," he said, not meeting her eyes, "we need to talk about rent." Her stomach dropped. "I paid you. On the 1st. I was 2 days late, but I paid the late fee." "I know. It's not about this month." He shifted his weight, looking older than his 60-some years. "It's about next month, and the month after. Buildings being sold. New owners are renovating, raising rates. Your rent's going up $400 starting December 1st. $400. Lena's legs went weak. She gripped the doorframe to stay upright. "That's not legal. You can't just—" "New lease terms. You can sign, or you can leave." His voice was gruff, but not unkind. "I'm sorry, kid." I pushed back as hard as I could. "They don't care. They want the building emptied so they can gut it, make it luxury apartments for tech people. Where am I supposed to go?" "Mr." Petrov shook his head. "I don't know, but you've got 3 weeks to figure it out." He turned to leave, then paused. "For what it's worth, you've been a good tenant, quiet, always paid eventually. I'll write you a reference if you need it." He walked away before she could respond. Lena closed the door and slid down to sit on the floor, her back against the cheap wood, her mind racing through calculations that didn't add up no matter how she arranged them. $400 more. She was already working 70 hours a week. There were no more hours to work, no more corners to cut, no more blood to squeeze from stones. Her phone buzzed. A text from her boss at the coffee shop. "Hey, can you cover Sarah's shift tomorrow morning? 4 a.m. start." Another buzz. "The data entry company. We're restructuring. Your contract ends November 30th. Thanks for your service." Lena stared at the messages until the words blurred. Restructuring. They were firing her with corporate speak and an email notification. One of her 3 insufficient incomes, gone. Just like that. She looked at the counter where the black card sat, innocent and terrible. "If you need anything, and I mean anything, call that number." She picked up her phone, pulled up the card, and stared at the silver numbers embossed on matte black. Her thumb hovered over the keypad. She could call. One phone call. And maybe Adrian would answer, and maybe he'd meant what he said about helping. But what could he actually do? Give her money? She didn't want money. Didn't want to be another charity case, another broken thing for someone to fix out of pity. She set the phone down, went to work, pulled espresso shots for people who didn't say thank you, who left their cups on tables for her to clean up, who treated her like furniture with a pulse. That night, she came home to find an envelope slipped under her door. Cream-colored, expensive paper, her name written in elegant calligraphy across the front. Lena's hands shook as she opened it. Inside was an invitation, printed on cardstock so thick it felt like a weapon. Gold lettering announced that Evan Cole and Victoria Ashford request the honor of her presence at their engagement celebration at the Grandview Estate. Black tie. Champagne reception. Dinner and dancing to follow. He'd actually done it. He'd actually invited her to watch him marry someone else, to witness his perfect life while hers disintegrated. A small note card fell out, handwritten, "Lena, really hope you can make it. It would mean so much to have you there. I've enclosed a guest pass in case you want to bring someone." E. A guest pass. Like she had anyone to bring. Like she had friends who owned formal wear and could take a Saturday night off to watch her get humiliated all over again. Lena crumpled the invitation in her fist. Then she smoothed it out, read it again, and felt something dark and unfamiliar unfurl in her chest. Not sadness this time. Not even anger. Determination. She picked up the black card, dialed the number before she could change her mind. It rang once. A woman's voice answered, professional and warm. "Good evening. How may I direct your call?" Lena's voice caught. "I'm looking for Adrian. He gave me this number. May I have your name, please?" Lena Carter. A pause, the sound of typing. Then, "One moment, Ms. Carter." The hold music was classical, something with violins that probably had a name she'd never learned. Lena sat on her floor, surrounded by unpaid bills and eviction notices, and the crumpled invitation to her ex-boyfriend's engagement party, and waited. The music cut off. A new voice came on the line, deeper, calmer, achingly familiar. "Lena." Just her name. Adrian said it like he'd been expecting her call, like he'd known exactly how long it would take for her to break. "You said if I needed anything." She stopped, swallowed. "I need help. I don't know what kind, but I need something to change because I can't keep doing this." "Where are you?" "Home. My apartment." "I'll send a car. 20 minutes." "I don't need a car. I need..." What did she need? Money? A new life? Revenge? "I need to know what you meant. In the car. When you said you were going to give me justice." Adrian was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice carried that same dangerous edge she'd heard before. "Your ex-boyfriend, Evan Cole. He works in private equity, correct?" "Yes." "How did you..." "I've been doing research. His firm manages investments for high-net-worth individuals, pension funds, charitable trusts." A pause. "He's also been running a private side operation, over-leveraging client portfolios, misappropriating funds, small amounts, hidden well, but consistent." Lena's blood went cold. "You're saying he's stealing?" "I'm saying he's a criminal who's very good at looking legitimate. He's built his entire life on other people's money and other people's trust. The suit, the fiancé, the Grandview Estate wedding, all of it paid for with funds that don't belong to him." "How do you know this?" "Because I make it my business to know who's operating in my city. And because when someone hurts something I'm interested in protecting, I pay attention." His voice softened slightly. "The car will be there in 15 minutes now. We'll talk more in person." "Adrian, what are you going to do?" "I'm going to give you a choice, Lena. But first, I'm going to show you that the man who made you feel worthless is the actual worthless one. That everything you thought was your failure was actually his crime." The line went dead. Lena sat in the silence, her heart pounding, that dark feeling in her chest growing stronger. She looked at the invitation again. Black tie. Champagne. The Grandview Estate. She stood up, walked to her closet, and looked at the few clothes she owned. Nothing appropriate for a society engagement party. Nothing that wouldn't announce her poverty the moment she walked in the door. The knock came exactly 15 minutes later. Lena opened the door to find a woman standing in the hallway, tall, elegant, wearing a tailored